Welcome to Mind the Chatter, a podcast where we're breaking down mental health one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Lilian, and my co-host is Peter.
Hello.
We are both licensed counselors, registered with the Counselors and Psychologist Board of Kenya. We are happy to have you join us.
Today we'll be diving into the ever-complicated world of family boundaries.
And immediately you say family and boundaries, I feel this chill because that's a toughie.
Yeah, and with boundaries, the image that comes to most people's minds is a wall. So something solid and cold, and it's meant to keep everybody out.
Yeah, it probably even has a warning. Umbwa kali, keep away.
But that's not quite it. You can think of boundaries more like a fence with a gate. They define your space, but they also allow you to connect on your own terms. So you decide who's coming in and how long they stay and what kind of energy they bring with them.
Yeah, because we're social beings and connection is very, very important to us. So if a boundary is something that keeps people away, then it puts you in isolation, which isn't exactly a fun place to be in.
When it comes to family boundaries, I can think of families operating as these emotional units. And since we're going to be focusing on families, maybe we should introduce a few terms.
Oh, yeah. One, you've said they operate as emotional units. And I remember when I was studying up on this, the picture I was given was strings. We are all connected in the family. And so what affects you affects me. And that brings us to something we call the family of origin and how it works.
You can think of family of origin as the family you grew up in. And this is the place you first learned about relationships, self-worth, and even how you interact with other people, whether it's arguments or negotiating with them. And those early patterns don't just fade away. They shape your mental frameworks, and that's what we call schemas. So schemas are internal rule books, and you can think of them as mental shortcuts. So you learn these things and they are very, very internalized. So if I learned that if I'm in a conflict, I'm going to get punished, then the moment you get into a conflict, it just kicks in and you know that what's going to follow is punishment. The thing about schemas is that we follow these rules unconsciously. You don't even know that you're doing it. So
Yeah.
the moment I raise my voice at you, you just find yourself reacting in a certain way because your schema tells you raising voice is equals to anger.
Yeah, it's immediately triggered. It's not like you will raise your voice and then I'll start thinking, oh, the last time I had someone raise the voice, then I shrank and kept quiet so that the argument would stop.
And this automatic nature, that's kind of the problem, because if you knew that I'm reacting like this because as a child, this is what happened, then maybe you can do something about it because you recognize you're no longer a child. Problem is it's happening automatically, so you don't even realize that you internalize something as a child and you're reacting in the same way.
Yeah, in the same way. This example we've taken is quite harsh if you think about it. Someone shouting and you shrinking in kind of to avoid the conflict that's going on. But it kind of segues into the next part. Why does putting boundaries with families trigger a certain kind of fear?
Because for most people, when it comes to boundary setting within the family, there's always some sort of fear impulse.
You've mentioned before that in families is where we learn the very first things, and specifically we learn the first aspects of relationships. This is where we learn how to love. This is where we learn how to argue, how to be ourselves and voice or communicate how we want to be treated. But in most families, setting boundaries is usually almost like you are destroying the system.
And this could be because in families, boundaries often get tangled with love, duty, and survival.
Yeah, and it could have been something as simple as a child, you didn't like the taste of tomatoes. And so anytime they were in the food, you'd make a fuss. And you were told, apana, kila mtu anakula hiyo. So immediately...
See, now I feel like you're talking about me because I actually didn't love the taste of tomatoes. But nobody told me it was wrong. So I'd actually be one of those kids who on my plate you'd find tomatoes put on the side. And
You are lucky. A lot of times I've heard even my aunt saying something like, everyone is eating it. Why are you trying to leave something on your plate? We don't waste anything in the family. So it can be something as small as that. It doesn't have to have been a no on I'm not going to church.
yeah, and maybe this actually comes to, as an adult, I'm very okay with people leaving food on their plates. And if you eat what you find comfortable, leave what you don't. Because I guess I learned that as a kid.
You clearly weren't hit with the line, there are people starving, eat your food.
Yeah, it's one of those lines which you think, okay, so there are people starving, and if I stuff my face, somehow the nutrients will diffuse to, I don't know.
I have not thought that deeply.
So there are some key reasons why boundaries feel threatening in families. And the first one is what we've been talking about, early conditioning. Families shape our understanding of what's allowed, like in the example we've given. So you grow up knowing that this is permissible and this is not. If emotions were dismissed, for example, stop crying, or if your privacy is ignored, then you learn that boundaries equate to conflict or abandonment. As a result of these, as an adult, asserting your needs triggers these old fears. So even if the consequences are not the same, I mean, let's go back to the example of you being told you have to clear your plate. Right now, you're an adult, nobody's going to ask you. But somehow, subconsciously, you think if I don't clear my plate, there are some people starving somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's a very unconscious thought because now you're thinking, if I leave food, I'm wasting.
And I was told wasting is.
Yeah, it's bad. The other thing is enmeshment. Enmeshment is a family dynamic where the relationships are overly close and most times boundaries are blurred. So you find that an individual's identity can be underdeveloped because then you're not quite an individual
Yeah,
in
and
that
you have some
relationship.
sort of excessive involvement with each other.
Yeah. The other thing is a role lock-in. This is where your role in the family is pretty, I'd call it rigid. In families, you'll find there's the peacemaker, the one who kind of removes the tension when there's an argument, or there's the caretaker, the one who's responsible for all the other people.
And I think if you come from a family whereby you have a number of siblings, as we're talking, you already have in mind who you call when you guys are having an argument and you need somebody to mediate.
Yeah, and this one is the one who can be listened to by both parties without things exploding.
Or probably when you guys are having trouble coming up with a decision, you know who you're going to call, and you know they're very good at helping you guys make decisions.
And what happens in this scenario is that because the boundaries are so together, then it's a little difficult for someone to go like, hey, I would rather have my space, or I'd rather not be involved in this argument that you guys are having.
If you're the mediator, you see a call and then you kind of already know this call is because
They
they're
must not be
fighting.
okay.
Yeah, and then you can't say no because that's the role you've always played. And
Yeah.
saying no, you'll even feel like you're betraying them.
And I'm even thinking the caretaker, anytime you're picking this phone call, you're already thinking, now what do they want? The other thing would be you fear that you lose a connection. In most cases, the response that you get when you state a boundary is immediate pushback. And this pushback, most times, it triggers a thought that I'm being selfish. If I do this, they'll think I don't love them. And you feel like you're going to lose this connection with the person you're stating a boundary to.
So you're going to conform just because you want to avoid doing anything that might jeopardize this bond that you guys have already formed. So you feel like establishing your boundary might be a threat to this bond that you guys have.
And basically, what we're saying is that most times you've learned that stating individuality or stating boundaries is kind of dangerous because all these things are not fun to do. Like losing someone you love or jarring the system is not fun. So, yeah, maybe we can get into the next section.
Before we dive into the next section, just a quick note. In this podcast, we'll add our own flavor to the topics we cover, but everything is grounded in counseling theory and sound psychological research.
We are drawing from the works of dozens of scholars and theorists we positively cherish. So basically, what we're saying is we're standing on the shoulders of giants.
We're standing on. See, that's one of the phrases I never get. Why do you have to stand? I mean, why not sit?
You look taller when you stand.
I mean, unless it's a 7-foot giant, if it's like a really, thousands of feet or hundreds of feet, why do you need to stand?
Again, so that you feel taller than the giant you're standing on.
We're sitting on the shoulders of giants and we can still see very far. That's the whole idea.
Standing makes it better. But I'm short, so probably we have different perspectives on this.
All right. So now the question you're probably asking is how do you know that you have boundary issues with your family?
Yeah, sometimes these things are happening and you don't quite know it. And sometimes you feel there's a discomfort in it, but it's not clear why there's a discomfort.
Yeah. And then there's also the issue of if you don't know there's a problem, you won't do anything to fix it. You'll
Yeah.
just have this, general sense of there's something wrong here, but you don't really know. So over here, maybe we can tell you some of the signs that, you might need to establish stronger boundaries.
Yeah, and to start with, it's feeling drained after you've had interactions with your family. It could be on phone, it could be a hangout that you attended, it could even be a random weekend visit, but after the visit you feel emotionally drained.
And what you might end up doing is, either dreading interacting with that family member, or in this case, if it's a phone call, you just see their call and you already feel drained because you know what's coming.
And an extreme of this would be I've had friends who've not visited home in 3 years because the thought of going home and being home is already very uncomfortable.
Something else is feeling guilty about decisions you make. So, say you're in this family whereby you have to call your parent every single day. You don't feel like calling. Maybe you're just having a day with your friends or one of those days when you just want to recover. But in your head, it's, I have to call mom. And if you don't, you're going to feel guilty. So you end up calling, not because you want to talk with them, but because of guilt. So you're doing a lot of things out of guilt, not because you particularly enjoy what you're doing.
And I've actually had this a couple of times in my sessions. Sometimes it's as simple as if I don't call her today, the next time I'll call her, she's going to start with, squeeze you metusahau. So it can be a very simple statement, but it eats at you.
If you're constantly being driven by guilt to do things, whether it's give people your time or give people your things.
Oh, I just thought housing relatives.
Oh yeah,
Sometimes you
yeah,
even
yeah.
housing them, because if you don't house them, it's going to be the next story in the family get
Yep,
together.
yep.
Yeah. Another thing to look out for is feeling like your privacy isn't being respected. It could be on finances, it could be on relationships.
I think relationships are the major things, especially when it comes to girls. You reach a certain age, you aren't married, and then your family is all up in your business, and for some reasons you can't even tell them no.
Ooh, aunties are all there. Hey, this year hakuna mtu. And you're already thinking, I'm not even in a space to be in a relationship, or I don't want a relationship right now. But the pressure is constant. But I've also heard of it in finances, where you'll get statements like, si uko na kazi mzuri, why won't you help out nani?
And then they'll probably even want to know, how much are you making so that they know how much they deserve from.
Yeah, I've even had extreme ones where someone is going to even tell you, you have a wealthy husband. Why don't you ask him for the money?
Yeah, so that whole lack of respect for privacy, that tells you, there's a boundary issue. And then something else is you become the family therapist, whereby you're constantly soothing your parents' emotions or mediating conflicts or fixing your siblings' problems. You're in this position whereby you're the person people will come to talk to when they're having a hard time, and your role is to make them feel better.
Yeah, and sometimes they deserve kind of feeling the way they're feeling because
This is a
they
no
created
judgment
the
space,
problem.
so ignore what she just said.
What I mean here is, you listen to the story and you're thinking, you have put yourself in this hole. So why am I being dragged into it?
And you have to listen and then make them feel better. So that's your role. So if you constantly find yourself in a position where you're having to play therapist, that's a boundary violation.
And then finally, maybe we talk about avoiding conflicts at all costs. And here it already shows that conflict is this monster in your head that doesn't need to be triggered.
Yeah, because the thing about human relationships, conflicts are inevitable, and sometimes they are something you can grow from.
Conflicts kind of give a platform for you to communicate how you'd want to be treated or what would work for you.
Yeah.
So avoiding them kind of robs you of that chance.
What you should learn is that avoiding conflict isn't loyalty. It's more of like self-abandonment. Like, it's like, I don't matter.
Yeah.
I'll just go with whatever you say.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in the last podcast where we were talking about when you suppress things over and over again, it builds up and it can show up in a very bad way.
So far, we hope that we've painted this picture whereby you understand that boundaries are important. And the question would be, if they are so important, why do we feel like they're this dangerous thing and we don't want to establish them because our brains often treat them as dangerous, not because they are, but because we are wired to believe it.
Exactly. Avoiding boundaries isn't a flaw. It's more of self protection. And it's probably something you've learned very early in childhood that's kind of outlived its usefulness.
Yeah, so maybe a couple of examples. The first thing is, you have fear of emotional consequences. And for most of us, setting a boundary in the past led to punishment, withdrawal, or even guilt. So saying, I need space was probably met with anger or silence. So in your schema, boundaries is equals to loss of love.
Yeah, and silent treatment can hurt, especially as a child. Now, even as adults, the idea of saying no just triggers that old fear.
Will they reject me? Will I be alone? So in your brain, rather than risk it, you're like, let me just go ahead and not say no.
So, probably in your family, saying you didn't want something to happen was taken as disrespect. And that's a very good reason to have a conflict avoidance because you don't want to be taken as being disrespectful to your caregivers. So, another reason why we avoid boundaries is guilt or maintaining the good child or good person myth.
And many of us internalize that being good means being self sacrificing, or you grew up hearing stuff like, family comes first, or, and this is used by a lot of parents, after all I've done for you, this is how you repay me.
Yeah, and that's such a scary statement to go after.
Yeah, and that's used a lot.
Mm.
And for most parents, they'll even make it seem like I might die tomorrow.
I know, and I have done all these things. I have educated you. I have made sure that you had food. Like all these things are stated as if they are debt.
So you have this whole perception that I have to be good at whatever cost, because prioritizing myself, that's betraying.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing would be a fear of escalation. You already anticipate that if I put up a boundary or if I communicate a boundary, it's going to lead to yelling or passive aggression or emotional blackmail. And you're thinking, it's not worth the drama. See, I'm there for 2 days, 3 days, and then I'm back at my place. I don't need to get into it.
Yeah, and you can think of your siblings or parents who just get aggressive and angry and they shout whenever you place a boundary. For example, you have a sibling who has invited you somewhere and you're trying to say no, and then they just turn angry, telling you how they've made all these plans and you've made them waste money and time. So, and then they do this repeatedly. So, moment they make a request, you just know, especially if they tell you they've already made the plans.
Mm-hmm.
You know that if you say no, it's just going to lead
Just
to this.
escalate to something that you don't want
Yeah, so just
to
this
be in.
torrent of angry.
Yeah, and you probably can't tell them, I didn't tell you to make the plan.
See, now that would be establishing a boundary, but
Mm.
you're not at that stage yet.
Yeah, true. But if you think about it, avoidance, for a little time, it will work. But it has this way of building up into burnout, into resentment. You are meeting this person, and instead of a connection, you're just feeling pressured and you're feeling like you don't want to be there. So, in the long run, it becomes a problem.
And then finally, there's the lack of models. So if in your family no one had healthy boundaries, then you might not even know what it looks like. Because for you, it's normal. It's normal for you to come through for your parents
Yeah.
and your siblings. It's normal for them to make demands of you. You don't know anything different.
Yeah. So in such situations, you'll even find your siblings are part of what is adding pressure. For example, you're having a parent who's unwell and they need to be taken care of. You'll find your sibling calling you and asking you, why won't you come? I've been there for 2 weeks. You need to stop your life and come. And probably it's not the right time for you to do that. And you're even supporting financially and doing all these other things. But they'll be insistent, you come because this is something we've all been doing. We've been part of it.
Yeah. So in the entire family, all of you guys kind of are enmeshed and there's nobody to show you different.
And I think a lot of families experience that. I've had enough instances where someone is talking about how do I even start putting a boundary?
Yeah, and when you introduce the issue of boundaries, most people are shocked because, as I said, they didn't even realize it was an issue.
Mm.
Yeah, they were experiencing burnout or sense of guilt, but they didn't really know what was causing all this.
I know you're just thinking it's part of family. Setting boundaries with families feels impossible because your brain learned early that not having boundaries keeps you safe or keeps your connection safe. And therapy can help unravel that.
There are different modalities in therapy, and one of the ones I love, it's called coherence therapy. And from this perspective, your struggles make perfect sense. So the patterns you have now, whether it's people pleasing, guilt, avoidance, they likely serve a purpose in your family system. So maybe compliance gets you love, or defiance will lead to punishment, so you'd rather avoid that.
And
So
probably just to caution the listeners, this doesn't mean that now that we've mentioned it makes perfect sense for you to go like, that's how I am. That's just me. That's not the point.
all right. So therapy will help you uncover why, these behaviors feel necessary to you and how they are hurting you now. So if your fear is, if I say no, I won't be loved, that feels very real to you.
Yeah.
But through therapy, you can learn that, oh no, that's something from your childhood. And right now, saying no will actually not lead to not being loved.
Yeah, so there's always a hidden logic to how you're behaving or why you're avoiding creating these boundaries in the first place. And this could be attached to your core fears. For example, if we go back to the schemas, it could be if I say no, I'll be abandoned. They won't talk to me for weeks. Or if I set a limit, then I'm being selfish. I'm not communicating that I love them.
And over here, therapy will help you trace these beliefs back to their origin. And then probably you'll realize that, oh, my guilt comes from a childhood where love was transactional. So I had to do A in order to be loved. And then if I didn't do whatever was expected of me, I got some sense of abandonment.
And another thing would be the roles. It could even be that you are the peacemaker of the family. And so anytime you're thinking of disrupting how the family runs, you're wondering if I create chaos, then who is going to mediate? Who's going to come back and calm things down?
And then, as we've indicated, for most people, it doesn't seem worth it. You're just okay with maintaining the status quo,
Mhm.
and you may think, it's just easy to go along with things as we've always done them. So therapy can help highlight the real cost, whether it's in burnout, resentment, because a lot of resentment builds up when you're talking to
Yeah.
somebody, and then the way they talk about their family, you're like, okay, then why do you do the things you do if
I
you
know. I always get this statement. If it's a call, it's only going to go up to 30 minutes. I can survive 30 minutes. Or it could be if I visit for a weekend, then I can disappear for months. It seems like the cost is very little, but it's backed up by so much resentment and so much drain.
So in therapy, we'd examine how your boundary struggles show up, whether it's in exhaustion after a family call or what you're sacrificing to keep the peace. So could be your needs, your time, your other relationships.
In my experience, what therapy does, it kind of puts up a mirror and you're able to see that, wait, this is not normal. This is not how things are supposed to work. I'm not supposed to feel so tired after I've had a call with my sister. It's supposed to be a connection that I'm happy about. So in therapy, you're able to kind of identify that burnout I'm feeling is not what we are aiming for. Or disappearing for months on end and going home annually is not quite what it should be.
Yeah, and most times, as I said, you don't even know something is a problem until somebody points it out.
And a lot of people won't point it out because they're probably experiencing the same thing.
So now we're almost at the end of the episode today. And as always, we'll be providing you with some tools to help you deal with boundary issues.
And in this case, it will be how to word it and even what you can do to prepare yourself to state your boundaries.
Yeah. So the first tool would be coming up with an if then script. So this is very useful for people who freeze up or you feel they need to over explain. So you just come up with a script. If you keep criticizing my parenting, then I'll end the call.
Yeah, as opposed to you keep criticizing my parenting and I am trying my best and I don't understand how
So
you don't
right there,
see it.
you're over explaining, and you know the moment you start over explaining, you'll go off script. But if you keep it simple, if A, then B. If you keep up showing unannounced at my door, then I won't answer the door. So such a tiny script, but communicates clearly what you want.
Yeah, and probably something we haven't put emphasis on. The first steps of actualizing a boundary are very uncomfortable. Because even as you were saying these examples, I'm imagining ending the call on someone you have never ended a call on is not fun. Or leaving your cousin knocking at the door because they just showed up is not fun. But discomfort is very normal. And most times, um, with any change comes discomfort.
And I think over here I have to emphasize, don't come up with this script if you don't intend to live up to the consequence. So if you
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
somebody, if you show up unannounced, then I'll literally just kick you out. If you don't implement it, then in that
Kind
case, then they
nullifies the
can't.
whole thing.
Yeah, your boundaries will be violated over and over. So it's very important. If you set a boundary, stick to it. It's going to be uncomfortable, but bear with the discomfort.
Yeah, because most times the discomfort won't last forever. If this person still wants to be in your life, still wants the connection, they're going to adjust to your boundary. So, another tool would be something called the broken record technique.
This is something which probably the younger audience won't understand. So, once upon a time, we used to have records, like a record disc. And if it was broken, it would keep repeating the same phrase over and over and over. And so that's the idea of the broken record. I don't know if I've painted a good enough
If
picture.
anyone has seen a CD, they probably would get it when it's scratching.
Yeah, that might work too. So the idea is keep repeating the same thing like a broken record.
Yeah. And this is especially for people who tend to guilt trip you when you're trying to put down a boundary. Instead of justifying what the boundary is, you just keep repeating it. No matter what they say, you repeat it. For example, it would be you're trying to get out of lending money that you can't lend at the time. And this person keeps repeating, oh,
Family helps family.
yeah. So what you do is just repeat it. I'm not available to lend money this time. I'm not
But family helps
I'm
family.
not available to lend money.
But family helps family.
I'm not available to lend money.
So the idea over here is you do not justify what you're saying. You
Yeah.
just repeat it like a broken record.
Yeah, and this kind of robs them of that opportunity to go into the guilt trip cycle because you're not really giving them details to start on.
Yeah, you're not opening space for negotiations. The next method is the sandwich method. I hate it.
Okay, so go away. The next method is the sandwich method. And this one is pretty good for people who are sensitive, either the one who's receiving the boundary or the one who's giving the boundary, because it invites connection. In this case, you'd be saying something like, hey, I love you, but I can't be available for your birthday party. How about we have lunch after the party? That way, you make it very clear that it's important to keep the connection, but at the same time, you're not available.
Another technique would be the time buffer rule. And I love this one. This is whereby you train yourself to say, I need to think about it. So you don't answer immediately. Somebody makes a request, you don't give an immediate answer. You always say, I need to think about it. I'll get back
Mhm.
to you. And this is perfect because mostly people who lack boundaries with you will pressure you. Whenever they make a request, you're already pressured to say yes in the
Yeah.
moment. So if you can give yourself time,
To even consider the pros and cons and all that, you're able to even come up with how you're going to answer.
yeah. So this breaks the automatic yes reflex because if it's family, they'll call you, hey, I need you to do this. And then your automatic response is yes. But if you can create a little bit of time for yourself, let me think about this, I'll get back to you, then perfect. You're able to establish a boundary because you give yourself time.
And I like this one because then you're working on yourself specifically and not other people. Another tool is uh, creating an emotional armor. And like we've said, there's a lot of discomfort that comes with putting down boundaries,
Yeah,
especially
you feel guilt and
yeah.
shame. So if you can have a way to defend yourself from this, that would really help.
Yeah. So what happens with this is this starts with you write down what boundary you want to set and then write down what consequence you're expecting. Once you've done that, ask yourself, can I survive this consequence?
Maybe an example would be good so that our listeners can kind of visualize this.
Okay. So imagine your sister has planned a vacation to Diani for 4 days, let's say, and she wants you to babysit her children. You're tired, you can't babysit for them. So write down, my boundary is going to be, I can't babysit the kids for this weekend. What do you expect your sister is going to do? Probably she'll start guilt tripping you. She'll probably throw a tantrum. So ask yourself, am I going to survive that? Am I going to manage listening to her go, I've been there for you. I come through for you. Why won't you allow me to go on this vacation and I'm
And in
tired?
this case, it would actually help to remember times when you said no and survived it.
Yeah. And then finally plan how you're gonna do self-care after that. Once you've had this conversation where you tell her I won't babysit for you, then what can you do to kind of regain your energy or your balance?
Okay, so I think if you're able to apply some of these tools and techniques, they will get you on your way to establishing boundaries, and hopefully you'll be able to have a healthier relationship with your family.
Yeah. And remember, if families came with manuals, we'd probably be out of jobs.
So, boundaries, they're not about shutting people out, they're about protecting what's inside your time, your peace, your sense of self. Think of them less as imposing walls and more like fences with a gate. You decide who comes in, when they come in, and how long they get to stay.
And remember, enforcing boundaries might feel awkward at first, especially with family, but you're not betraying anyone by taking care of your mental health. In fact, the people who truly care about you, they'll adjust. Maybe not right away, but they will. And if they don't, well,
Thank you for tuning in to Mind the Chatter. If today's episode resonated with you or just made you understand somebody in your life a little bit better, share it with someone who might need it, or don't. That's a boundary too.
that's it for today. Kudos!
Catch you on the next one.